Hello everyone, today we're going to be creating a quiz app with the help of ChatGPT. Now before you click away, this is a quiz app that actually functions sort of the way you would expect it to. So the way that this works is, whoever creates a new quiz, you say, all right, I don't know, math quiz or something. You then enter a question. I already have one sort of pre-prep. So what we'll say is, what is the length of side C? We choose the file, we upload an image for the question if we're so inclined, and then we can enter some answers for it. So maybe we say, I guess I should open up the image so you can actually see it. But basically it's just a quick little triangle question. It's just a triangle with sides 3, 4, and C. So of course 3 squared plus 4 squared is 25. So we know this is going to be the square root of 25, which is 5. So we just say, all right, I don't know what are some basic answers someone might pick. They might pick 16 because it's 4 squared. They might pick 9 because it's 3 squared. The answer is actually 25. And they might, I don't know, they might pick 36 for some reason. We can then choose the correct answer, which in this case is answer 3. We click add a question. And then we say, how did you get to that answer? And again, not the best question, but we can say, I don't know, I guessed, I cheated, Pythagorean's theorem, or the answer is always C, so I went with that. We set the answer once again to 3, and we click create quiz. That creates the quiz for us. It now has those images wherever we decide to put them. If the question doesn't have an image, it doesn't get one. And then as the user, we can take the quiz. It doesn't have like the right wordage, but you get the idea. So here we pick like answer 25, so answer C, and then down here we click, I don't know, a wrong answer. So we go with the fake answer D. We click submit quiz. I still have web console rendering, but that's okay. It tells you your score, which in this case we got half of them right. And down here we can see the correct answer is highlighted in green, and the incorrect answer, which was the one we chose, is highlighted in red. So that's basically what we're going to be building today. Oops. And I just want to go through sort of what I used ChatGPT for here. So the way I usually do this is I accidentally hit enter as I'm starting to type the prompt, wasting one of my precious prompts over a 4-hour period. I then actually do it where I say, create a Rails app, quizzes have many questions. Questions have 4 answers. Questions have 1 solution. They have 1 image attached. And I basically try and give it as much information about what I'm picturing as possible. This is sort of the way that I would go about scaffolding this myself. So I just say, here you go, here's what you need. I then tell it to use scaffold generators because I hate it when it generates a model and then it goes through and it uses like 5 of your daily or your 4-hour prompts just generating the views. And also nobody cares. You just go and you just change the views if you want to. And then I tell it to use Bootstrap for CSS. I think this was a mistake, kind of wasted some time here, but then it goes through, it tells you how to set it up. It uses Webpack because it doesn't have a concept of Rails 7. It doesn't understand that we already have Bootstrap installed. So then I kind of just scroll through here until I get to a point where something changes. So here it told me which migrations to run. This ends up changing a little bit. As you can see, there's a lengthy conversation here. But basically it tells me to create the quiz, tells me to create the questions with some references, blah, 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 nobody cares. It then goes through, tells me to do the model stuff. It does do a validation for the correct answer right away, which is pretty cool. Basically the correct answer is stored as an integer, and then it's checking for the inclusion in 1 through 4 because that's how many answers we expect to have. It sets up the routes, sets up the image attachments with active storage, and the rest of it is pretty good to go. So then we come down here, you can also see it's using some like form control stuff and image fluids, which means it's working with Bootstrap. So that works. And then I was like, all right, using this setup, how would you retrieve the correct answers associated question for display to the user? Which is to say, like, if I'm trying to say, in a page with all of your incorrect answers, how do I show you which question the incorrect answer was associated with? Because if it's stored as an integer, it doesn't really help me to say you got answer 2 wrong, or you got answer 3 wrong. That doesn't really make sense. So then it tells me, all right, here's how you can send the correct answer. You just do answer and then correct answer to get your answer 2, which is how this is being stored in the model. It's answer 1, answer 2, answer 3. And then it tells me how to display it. And I was like, okay, but now can we add the ability for a user to choose their answer for each question and submit the whole quiz? Here comes up with a clever solution that kind of works. It tells me to generate a controller, post stuff, and it says, all right, what I want to do is just create like a flash alert after you do your form submission. So this form does work. I think it gets the path wrong, but that's no big deal. But down here it says, here's your create for the controller, and then here's your flash notice, and that's what gets rendered on the page. So it tells you like what your score is. And that was fine, but then I was like, all right, what if we could do that nested form stuff? And we're almost done, I promise. But the nested form stuff, it doesn't really have a concept of it. So what I did was I went over to the Stimulus Components website. We've covered this nested stimulus form before. It's really useful. But again, ChatGPT probably doesn't know about it. So what I did was I just copied the entire text here down to the configuration, I think. And I said, here you go. Using this stimulus documentation, can you add a nested form to the quiz to allow for an arbitrary number of questions? And I scroll down here, and that's where it did the magic of hooking all of this up. And then there's like a bit of, telling it to continue and telling it that some buttons don't work. But, you get the idea. It's just a back and forth over time until I get all the way down here. And down here, it was just a question of getting it to acknowledge that the migrations were wrong. But it gets close enough because I want to add like the quiz user answers as a field to the model and not really do it through that flash alert. But okay, that's enough from me. Let's go ahead and let's actually do this. So I'm gonna have to move my notes over here because there's a lot of them, and I'm actually gonna move ChatGPT over here because this will be useful to copy from. Okay, I'm gonna do a Rails new video -j esbuild -c bootstrap, and I'll cd into the video and I'll run a code dot just to get all of that out of the way. So I'm going to move up my stuff over here. So the basic idea for this originally was supposed to be like some kind of speed run, but it got so, I don't know, it evolved to the point that you saw here with like the forms and stuff that I think we're just going to do it like a regular sort of, I don't know, tutorial slash ChatGPT spotlight where we show off what it can do. But yeah, so it's not super complicated. What I do want to do is maybe skip some of the intermediate steps because it'll save us a ton of time. But what we're going to do is scroll through the ChatGPT stuff and hopefully get down to the generation. So here it gives us the quiz scaffold. So we're just for the quiz, we just did a title of type string. That's fine. And then for the question, I think the question is something that I ended up changing, maybe, or this is for the quiz submissions. This is for the quiz submissions. Okay, so this is fine. So for our question, we tell it that it has a quiz of references. That's, of course, the quiz it belongs to. Content of type text, the 4 answers of type string, and a correct answer of type integer. You could, of course, change these to a type of text, I guess, if you wanted to. Really depends on what your requirements are. And then the image here is of type string. That is not necessary because we're using active storage. So I'm going to go ahead and run that migration. Next, what we got to do is come into the model. So we're going to come into app models and we're going to come into the quiz model real quick. Inside of the quiz model, again, like I said earlier, we had that correct answer text. I'm just going to put that whole thing in here. Oops. Because it's really not that interesting for me to refactor this 20 times. So basically we have many questions, dependent destroy. So if we delete a quiz, it deletes the questions it's associated with. And then because of the stimulus nested form, and again, we've covered this on the channel before, but because of the nested attributes, we have to accept nested attributes for the thing that we're nesting, which in this case is the questions. So we want to have many questions. So we have to accept those nested attributes. We reject if all are blank, and we say allow destroy true. For the correct answer text, we just say send the answer and then the correct answer number, which gives us something like answer 4. And these are in the model, So we've already set up this migration so that we have these 4 answers in our quiz. So this way we can just get the correct answer using that. So now we're done with the quiz.rb. So now we have to come up to the other model, which is going to be the question.rb. So we're going to come up here. This is pretty simple. We just want to say this has one attached image. The other thing that we want to do in the question is we want to say that this also validates the correct answer to ensure that it's included in that 1 to 4. And that's pretty much it for this model as well. So we can now close both of these. The next thing I want to do is come down to our config and our routes.rb. Now in the routes.rb, I'm going to skip a couple steps here, and I'm just going to include all the routes so we don't have to come back in here. We are going to be adding Devise, which means I should probably get rid of this because it'll add it manually. But we have the resources for our quizzes, we have a do block, and then we have the resources for our questions. And then we're also going to create resources for a quiz submissions controller. And then we have to rename it to submissions. This is just how ChatGPT generated it. Ideally, you'd probably just want to change this to a submissions controller so you don't need the as, because it does add a little bit of confusion, but I'll leave it like this. And then we have our route to the quizzes index. So this is effectively all we need out of our routes here. The next thing that we want to do is probably handle active storage real quick. So let me clear the console, come up here, and we're just going to say Rails active underscore storage :install. And then we'll just add the Devise and stuff right now too. So I'll say bundle add simple underscore form and Devise. And the reason why I'm doing this is because the simple form gives us the bootstrap styling out of the box, so we don't have to worry about that. So if we come over here to the gem file, I also have to add in the cringe form and stuff because I'm on Ruby 3.2 again, which you saw me do to myself, so I can't really complain this time. I'm going to go ahead and run a bundle command. That should install that form and gem for us. And then we're going to do a Rails G simple underscore form :install space -- bootstrap. Give us those cool bootstrap stylings. And then I'm going to do a Rails G Devise :install command. That'll add Devise back into our routes. I'm then going to do a Rails G Devise user command. And then I'm going to do a Rails G Devise :views command to generate those views, which now gives us those bootstrap styles. So that gives us our Devise stuff as well. That's pretty cool. The next thing that I want to do is come into our questions. So I'm going to close out of the gem file and come up to the views. We're going to come into the questions and the questions form. So this is the form you use to submit all of your questions if you're so inclined. Now in here, because you're going to have an image for each of the questions, you might want to include that somewhere, maybe like here, if that's what you want to do. This is probably not entirely required because we're going to be creating the questions inside of the quizzes. I just wanted to cover that real quick. For the question show, up here in the question and the show method, actually this is going to be in the question partial. So we're going to say in the I don't know why there's, oops, I'm in the quiz. In the question partial, up here, maybe we want to do, I guess below the ID, the image itself for the question. But then again, you have to get rid of the @ here to make sure that this looks good, which I probably also had to do. No, that's fine. Okay, so we're good with both of those. I'm just going through the checklist here. So now what we can do is we can tell it to handle the quiz submissions. So again, here you might not want to name it this, but we're going to go with it. We're going to say we're going to tell it to Rails generate controller, a quiz submissions controller with a create action. We also need a show action. I would probably just rename this to the submissions controller though, probably a little bit cleaner. So that'll create all of that for us. And now we can come over here, and I don't actually think I'm using the create action, but it's fine. We're going to come up to our controllers and we're going to go from here. So I have to rearrange some stuff. In the controllers, we're going to come into the application controller because in here we just tell it to do the authenticate for the user. Again, there's no roles in this, so that's kind of overkill. You could probably just add in like admins or stuff if you wanted to have user roles. But okay, now we need to handle some of the stimulus component stuff that we're told to handle from ChatGPT with the stimulus components. To do that, we're going to come into the quizzes controller, and I'm at F11. We're going to scroll down to the bottom. Down here, we only have one parameter being sanitized right now, but again, we have that nested form, so we're actually going to have to add quite a few. We're going to have to add the title, the image, and a set of question attributes, which is going to be everything we expect to get from those questions in the nested form, which is going to be the ID, the destroy, so that we can actually destroy a question if we need to, the answers, just like this, answer 1, 2, and 3, the correct answer, and the image for the question itself. So again, it's a long list, but that's what you get when you have all of these things being nested. The other thing we want to do, if we go to the new quiz page, the quiz page, we want to have a question by default there that's empty so that we can create the first question without first having to add or click add question. So that's basically it for the quizzes controller, I believe. So next we'll come up to the quiz submissions controller. This is where things get a little bit weird because ChatGPT was being very helpful in here. So the first thing it tells us to do is create a before action for the find quiz submission, which makes enough sense. So it's just a private method that gets a quiz submission from the database by checking for the parameters for it. We then have a quiz submission params down here, which requires the quiz submission. It permits the quiz ID, the user ID, the score, and the user answers. And then we can come down here, come up here, and in the show action, I'm going to actually get rid of this and move it up top because it makes more sense to me. We're going to have a quiz submissions for the at quiz, so we can display a single quiz on the quiz submissions page, so you can see what the quiz answers were and what you got wrong. And then in the create, we start by skipping the first step because ChatGPT didn't catch this, but we can actually add the create method here in addition to the show so that we don't have to do a find. We then grab the user answers and the correct answer and we just initialize those to some default values. We then come through and we do something a little bit ugly, but it is a params.each do with a key and a value. We check if the key starts with question underscore because of course we have to parse this for correct data. We then say, all right, so the question ID is the second part of that question underscore. The selected answer is the value that we're looping through to I. So for each of the params we're going to loop through, we're going to get a value. It's going to go, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. And then we just set that to the selected answer. We then set the user answers for this specific question. So question 2, for example, to be the selected answer, which we might have picked like answer 3. Or C or whatever you want to call it. We then say the question is equal to question.find by question ID. And then we say if the question.correct answer is equal to the selected answer, we increment the correct answers. We do this because it allows us to calculate a score down here, which is equal to the correct answers 2F divided by the quiz questions dot count times 100 to get that percentage that we display on the page. We then create the quiz submission, which we just call quiz submissions.create. It takes in the quiz, the current user, because we're authenticating in the application controller, and the user answers, just like that. We can go ahead and save all of that. And then the last thing we do here is we say redirect to the quiz submission path that we created earlier in the routes and pass in the at quiz as well as the quiz submission. And then I think we're done in the quiz submissions controller. Now, because of all of that, we do have to create the migration, I believe, for the quiz submissions. So if we come down here, we have to do the change answers. Yeah, so we have our quizzes, our questions, our active storage. We need to do the quiz submissions and the change to them. So for the actual quiz submissions, we can come down here. This has a Rails G model. This is going to be for, I guess we can call it like, quiz underscore submissions. And we can say this has a user colon references, a quiz colon references, and a score of type float, and I have to check, a user underscore answers of type JSON. Go ahead and run that. Hopefully that works. And then we can come over to our models real quick up here in our app models quiz submission. This now belongs to each of those, so that looks good. But we do have to give this a init, which is just a quick little after initialize that sets the user answers to be empty if they're not already, which does make the quiz submissions controller a little bit redundant here, but that's just sort of a remnant of refactoring from ChatGPT. But that gives us our migration now. So what we can do now is we can start working on the front end stuff, right? So we're done in the models, we're done in the controllers, and we're done messing around with the database. It's time to actually do the front end. So So the first thing I want to do is come into the JavaScript, because we want to include that nested form, which we can do inside of app JavaScript controllers index.js. So app JavaScript controllers index.js right here. We hit enter, paste this in. We then grab the nested form, paste it in right here, which is all stuff ChatGPT tells us to when we give it the information it needs. And then we can go ahead and close all of this. So that gives us access to that index.js. So the next thing I want to do is come into the views. So down here, I'm going to collapse everything, come into app, views, and inside of the quizzes, I want to right click new file underscore question underscore fields.html.erb. In here, I want to paste in all of these fields. And basically what this is it's a combination of what the stimulus component requests and the nested component stuff that we need so that we can actually show the fields for each of the questions. It also has some bootstrap styling. But basically what happens is you create the label in the text area for the question. You create the label and the file field for the image, which is handled by active storage. We then do 1 to 4 times do the answer index, or sorry, 1 up to 4. And then for this, we just set the label to be the answer plus the number. So it's just answer 1, answer 2, answer 3, because that's how it's stored in the database. And we have the text field for the answer indices as well. And then we just give it some classes here. We then set the correct answer with a label and a select, which is just what the user picks to choose their answer. So this is just a small little select with 4 options. And then we have the submit button, the remove button, sorry, and the destroy attribute here. Because when you submit this and you click remove, it does need to pass back this little parameter just so that it knows it's for realsies. So that gives us all of our question fields, which is, again, just kind of taken from the stimulus component here where they talk about adding this stuff. So a lot of it is already covered in there. And then we can come over to our actual form for the quiz. So we'll come up to the quiz form right here. Inside of the quiz form, we have that, oops, this isn't the quiz form. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong screen. Inside of the quiz form, we have this little form here that lets us add the title, but I think we can do a little bit more. We're going to start by, let's just get rid of everything. And we're going to do a form width for the model quiz, a local true, and then it's going to have some data. The data is going to be a controller for the nested form with the nested form wrapper selector value, which is all from the stimulus docs. You just copy and paste it in. And then we can come down here and we can close this form. Inside of this form, again, from the stimulus docs, it wants a template. So we're going to go ahead and create a template real quick. The template just has your form fields inside of it, and it's just a way to give it a piece of or a slice of code that you can then use every time you click add question. It will just grab this template sort of and set it up using this template, which is why we render the question fields inside of this template so that it has a form neatly wrapping around the question fields when you click add add question, so that all of this is self-contained. We then have to do the actual fields for, which if you've done them before, seems pretty familiar. You just say form.fields for the questions right here. And then we do the question fields. We render the question fields in here with a f:question fields. This, it's all coming from ChatGPT's interpretation of it, but it's surprising how well the solution actually works here. We then have to do the target. This is where the questions get added when you click add question. And then we have the actual add question button, which again adds the questions to here. And this will have one by default because of the question build we did in the controller earlier. After all of that, we can do a submit down here, and that should be it for the form for the quizzes. So now let's come down to the show page because in our quizzes and our show page, we have quite a bit to do. So we have our notice at the top. We're no longer going to be rendering the quiz here, and I'm just going to press enter a couple times. Instead, we're going to have a form here for selecting our answer of choice. And it's going to be a bit of a doozy, so bear with me. But if I move all of this over, hopefully we can get this all on screen. Maybe not. I'm going to tab this over a bit just so that you can see it all. Hopefully that works. There we go. Okay, so we start with a form width for the quiz submissions path, which is that route we created earlier. We pass in the @quiz, a local true, and a method of post. We then come in here, and you can see if I collapse this, ideally it would be all of this being collapsed. It's just a matter of how I've tabbed this over. But in here, we have the quiz.questions at each with index, with a question and a index. It's then some Bootstrap styling where we just set the question name to be whatever number it is. We then have the question content. We check if it has a image attached. If it does, we display the image with a class of img-fluid and mb-3. The fluid just causes it to resize itself so it doesn't blow up the page. And then down here, we iterate through each of the answers, and we create a radio button for the answers with a question underscore as the parameter, because that's sort of how we're going to be passing it back to the end there. So this is going to be where we set what the question name is. So we set the question label after the radio button, or sorry, the answer label after the radio button. So you can see like the radio button first, and then whatever the text is next to it. So you click the radio button with the stuff on the right, just like a normal quiz would show. And then here's how we create the label itself. And it's just a matter of grabbing the question.send helper method that we created earlier to get the actual question text, which is why I wanted it as well. Very helpful stuff. So I'm going to tab this over. Make sure you copy this if you need to. And then all the way down here, we just have our submit button. So after we have all of that, I think now we can come up to the quiz submissions and the show page in the quiz submission. So this is where we're actually showing you what your score was. So we're going to start by showing that by grabbing the @quiz submission, which is something we're passing back from the controller that we set up earlier, .score, and then we round it to 2 places, and then we just give it a percentage with a space for some reason, but I'm going to do this instead. We then have the actual quiz questions. So this is a little block we have right here, and by little, I mean it's not little. But in here, this should be the home stretch. We once again just create some Bootstrap cards. I'm going to paste this in, and I'm going to hide the side panel. So we create the cards with the question. We show the question content. We show the image if it's attached again. Same thing as before. You could probably extract this out to a partial. We then do 1 up to 4 times with the answer index. Once again, repeating a bit of code here, but this time we do the form check, and we say if the answer index is equal to the question.correct answer, that means you got it correct. So we change the div class to an alert of success, and then we say the correct answer colon is this answer right here. If the answer index is incorrect, we say your incorrect answer is equal to the question.send answer. And then this is how we're showing you that the alert danger is red. So you know that you got the question wrong. Else we just set the alert to be a secondary, which is a bit more gray. Now, assuming we've set all of this up correctly, which is a bold assumption, we should now be able to come over here and run a bin/dev and come over to localhost port 3000. And we have to run some migrations here. Go ahead and run all of those. It now takes us to our login page. And maybe what we also want to do is just real quick come into our layouts and our application.html.erb, and we'll just do a .container.mt-5 to make everything look a little bit nicer. We can refresh. There we go. So now I'm going to come over here. I'm going to sign up with Dean at example.com. Oops, example.com. I have to sit at a weird angle with my keyboard. I'm going to use the email as my password, click sign up. And now I'm going to create a new quiz. This so far seems good. We can create a question. Calculate the value of C. And then we can choose a file. And we'll choose the lovely picture I made in Paint earlier. You can then say, I don't know, what do we say? Like 9, 16, 25, 36. The correct answer is 3. We add another question. But the add question button here isn't working. Oh, I just realized what the issue probably is. What we need to do is come over to here and actually run the yarn add command. So we're going to go ahead and run a yarn add stimulus-rails-nested-form to add the stimulus controller. Now if we run a bin/dev, we should hopefully be able to just refresh. Click add question. There we go. Okay, so now we're going to say calculate C. We're going to choose a file, click that thing. We're going to say this was what, 9, 16, 25, and 36. We add another question, why or how did you know? And then we're going to say, I guessed, I cheated, Pythagorean's theorem, and answer is always C. And then we'll click create quiz. That creates the quiz for us. Looks good. We now come down here, click this, and click an incorrect answer. We can submit the quiz. Takes us to a new page, but it doesn't actually submit the quiz. So let me come in here and scroll up a bit. It tells us error 404 not found in something here. So let's come down here. It looks like maybe I have to come back here, and we'll just try this again. I'll click 25 and answer C, click submit. We'll see what it says. Couldn't find quiz submission without an ID. So if we come over here to our submit, our submit, we have to come up to our controllers, our quiz submissions controller, where we do this show and create find. Find quiz submission right here. Tries to find it based on an ID. I'm assuming that it probably, I see what we're doing wrong. So we have to get rid of the create before action right here, and we actually have to grab the quiz and not the quiz submission. So that makes a lot more sense. We're going to do the at quiz equals quiz.find params quiz ID. And then this allows us to use our at quiz when we need to and not our quiz submission, because it doesn't make sense to do that in our create. Don't know what I was thinking there. I probably wasn't. So we'll click 25. Answer is always C. Hopefully it'll work this time. Click submit. And it tells us that the correct answer here is 9. We chose 25, which is my fault. The correct answer here is I guessed, and the answer is always C. So the reason why I did this is because I didn't change what the correct answer actually was for the quiz. So we can do that real quick. We can come over to quiz/1. We can edit this quiz, and we can say the correct answer for this one is 3, and the correct answer for this one is 3. We can now update this quiz, and we can try this again. We'll say 25 and C. I'll click submit. We can now come over here, refresh, and we now have our 50%. So yeah, so now it should hopefully all be working. We can come over here, our correct answer, our incorrect answer, all of it seems to make sense. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a lot of time before this video needs to go up, so I can't really do a long outro, but hopefully you found this interesting. The source code will be in the video description, as well as a link to the nested stimulus components page. And feel free to look up that tutorial if you're interested in seeing more about these nested forms. But that's going to do it for me. Hopefully you found this interesting and helpful, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.